have seen pit bulls and Rottweilers chew at the bottom of chain link fences and keep pushing and working it over time until they can make it enough where they can squeeze. Once they get their head through, then they just squirm their bodies and they go underneath the fence. The only customers that really pick wood are the customers that are adamant about an aesthetic, because they're the most beautiful fencing systems that money can buy are built out of wood. You can just make gorgeous things happen with wood.
Yeah.
They just don't have the life expectancy in New England. Because some towns, like I was told, I spoke to a building inspector about a year ago in Cranston, and he said they have an 8-foot code height. So you can create a fence up to 8 foot high and anything over that. And secondly, once you depart from 6 feet high, you'll now enter the word custom. And with that comes a cost. And
Welcome everybody, I'm Kamil Sarji, your host of Just 2 Minutes, and today I have Mario here. Mario, you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. I own a small fence and deck installation business called FenceRI.com. We service, obviously, the state of Rhode Island. We reach into the border parts of Massachusetts and Connecticut as well.
All right, awesome. We're going to talk about fence and, helping real estate agents know more about fencing. But first, this show is called Just 2 Minutes. So we got some random questions for you. And I have my timer, which is my watch. Today's a crazy windy day, so we're hanging in here.
Good day for fences.
Good day for fences. Or people calling up hey, this was installed by some random
They'll all be on
company.
The ground laying flat by the end of the day today.
Oh my gosh. Okay. A timer and go. Is it lumber or lumber?
Lumber.
Lumber. Then what is lumber support and how do we use it when we're pondering?
Say that again.
Lumber support?
Oh, so lumber, see, because I'm in the trades, I think of 2x4s and boards. I'm not thinking of, you're talking lumbar, like for back and posture?
Yeah. Or, either way.
I don't know. That one's over my head, but I can tell you how to build something for lumbar support.
Okay. So speaking of building, if I were to build a bridge, would you trust your dog crossing it?
Well, if the state of Rhode Island was building it, probably not. I'd have to pass on that.
Okay. But what if I was building a bridge? Would you trust that your dog would do it?
Well, if you were building it, I'd probably buy it from you.
It's a small bridge. Just, over like
Any water under it?
A little bit.
That's safe then. I'll let the dog cross.
Okay. Would you walk over it?
Would I walk over it? Well, I can't swim, so I might be hesitant.
Okay. What's the most memorable moment at your first job when you were a kid? I'm assuming you were a kid when you...
Yep. Most memorable moment, I believe, is when it was horrible. I was 15 years old. I was tasked to take American flag off of the pole. It was as windy as it is today. And the wind grabbed it and blew it onto Hartford Avenue. We're in the middle of traffic.
Boom. That was...
It was horrible.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So you had to run and...
I was stopping traffic. I had people flipping out because the American flag hit the ground, So this is long. I was 15. This is before I even joined the service. So I wasn't familiar with flag etiquette. Not that it was done on purpose anyway. But I learned a lesson in patriotism that day.
Yeah. Wow. And, all the pressure and you're a young kid experiencing the stress and
yes,
I got to fix this before.
In the heavy traffic. It was crazy.
All right. So let's talk about fence. So what common types of fences are there?
I would say the first breakdown would be your material style: wood, vinyl, or metal, chain link or aluminum. Then the second question is, what are you trying to achieve? Are you looking for privacy or barrier or aesthetic or both? And that will help me dial in a start point for what it is that you're looking for your application.
Okay. Now with the vinyl, like I'm imagining, like how high can you get with each of those?
Most towns have a code at 6 feet high. 6 feet is the highest standard.
For any city, town?
Most, I say most, because some towns, like I was told, I spoke to a building inspector about a year ago in Cranston, and he said they have an 8-foot code height. So you can create a fence up to 8 foot high, and then anything over that, you have to pull a permit or a variance, etc. So it does change from town to town what they will allow. I mean, I get customers all the time that call me up and say, yeah, I want a 60-foot fence up because I don't want to see my neighbors. I tell them, you got to check with your local zoning first. And secondly, once you depart from 6 feet high, you now enter the word custom. And with that comes a cost. And that generally tempers them immediately.
Wow. So what's the reasoning behind them the towns limiting the sizes?
There's a couple of things, like the town over here in Woonsocket, they are probably...
North Smithfield.
Well, Woonsocket's right over the line over here. I've done a few quotes for them and some installations, and they have to have the most vicious regulations as far as permitting to do any kind of construction in that particular town, and definitely the most strict fencing regulations I've ever seen. So when installing in Woonsocket, I had asked the building officials over there, why is it so strict? Like, what's the reason for you? We have to pull a permit, or the customer has to pull a permit to install even a little fence in their backyard to get some privacy. And the feedback I got, at least from this specific town, they were trying to avoid a hodgepodge of fortress-like looks varying from neighbor to neighbor. So this person puts up a 6-foot fence and then it butts up against a different kind of 6-foot fence, and you got wood and you got vinyl and you got steel and you got all. So they said that they are trying to change the aesthetic of the town by regulating the fence heights and where you can put them in your yard, etc. I know that when you do exceed 6 feet high with a fence, especially a solid privacy fence, you start getting into issues of torque with the wind. So when you get windy days like this, the longer that post is, easier it is to snap and fall over. Because I don't know if you've ever had to break a bolt with a ratchet. You put a pipe on the end of the ratchet and it takes effortless. Yeah. Well, that's the same. You got the same leverage as you go longer on these fence posts. And take that times how many posts are on the line. They're giant sails. Once the wind comes, down it goes. So, and it could be a safety hazard when you're talking like wooden fence, 10 feet high. The wind takes it, snaps those poles. So I would say another reason that you get regulations. And then biggest one is you have to have some kind of uniformity, because if you left people to their own devices, from the calls that I've gotten over the years, people would go as tall as they could. So they blot out their neighbor completely. They'd build it over the roof of the house if they could.
Yeah. Why, I mean, to solve that, why wouldn't they just say, case by case basis?
Well, that's what a variance is for.
That's so much work going in front of the town to explain. Why doesn't the building inspector say, oh, all right, you want to build an 8-foot just like the neighbor so it looks good and you're using same material? All right, well, I'll prove this.
Well, the building inspector's job is to check the work quality, make sure you follow code. He's not the town planner that decides what goes up and what doesn't go up in your town. So he wouldn't have the authority to make that kind of decision, hence the town hall meeting. You get the variance, now you get feedback from your neighbors. So this is for an exception. Like, I guess if you had a junkyard, let's say, and you wanted to put up an 8-foot fence, obviously it would be helpful for the neighbors. You would assume everybody would be in agreement with that, but I wouldn't trust that decision to a building inspector. You have the city planner, let the neighborhood weigh in, and then go that route.
Okay. Do you think the building inspector is worried to accept things and would rather them go to town to decide, or?
The building inspector, again, his focus is safety and codes. If it looks ugly, but it meets code, he's going to tell you, meets code, and he's going to approve it. His job is strictly to make sure that you have followed whatever parameters are set by the town. You've created something to the code standard of their build. Anything outside of that scope is not his specialty. It's almost like different lawyers for different types of law. You're not going to take a lawyer that does automotive claims and then have, negotiating border disputes, with property. So it's a specialized field. So, and there's a lot of code for a building inspector to handle just for that portion of his job, and to add any more to that palette, I think would be overwhelming, especially for some of the inspectors I've crossed over the years.
Okay, so 6 foot is standard, you would say?
6 foot is a standard height on fences, and that comes right from the manufacturer. So if you want something that exceeds that, it can absolutely be obtained. But now you go into custom, because now they have to produce something, or I have to build it from scratch to accommodate your need.
Would you say over 8 feet is custom?
Over 6 feet is definitely custom. Anything over 6 feet. So if it's 7 feet, 6.5 feet, it's all custom. It doesn't exist. We have to build it from scratch.
Okay. So metal, PVC.
Some metal fences like chain link, because, chain link is a commercial fence. They will have standard heights that exceed 6 foot. We're talking the majority of the general cases, which is wood and vinyl and decorative and residential grade. Commercial is a whole different animal, because obviously, go by facility and you'll see 8 foot fence with barbed wire on top of it. Yeah. And that's designed specifically. There is a production run that creates stuff that height for those applications, because it's a market.
You've done that?
I have done barbed wire commercial fencing, yes.
Wow, okay. Let's talk more about compliance, just to get that out of the way. Anything else as far as requirements that we might not know that we can...
Every town is completely different from the next. You would think that codes are standard, but it's an interpretation of a code. It's a kind of like law. If you go to this district and this district, the same trial that's being heard will have 2 different outcomes based on how they interpret the law. The same thing happens, we find, with inspections in towns. So for instance, we build a deck in town A. They're going to focus on, the way we put the ledger up against the house and our spans, and they're going to be stickler about how we fasten that ledger. And if I go to town B, they're not too concerned about the ledger. They see that they don't care about the pattern. They just see that you got it secure. But their stickler is, we're going to focus on footings. We're going to make sure. So depending on what town you live in will depend on what it is that they're going to focus on, even for fencing when you're talking about codes. So I tell all my customers, there are way too many towns and cities for me to keep up with. So when I do go to install for a customer in a particular town, I put the burden on them to just make a quick call to town hall and just ask, do I need a permit for this? And if they do, then we'll follow through and we'll do what we have to do for them.
How about building too close to your neighbor?
Again, town to town. It's like, I believe Cranston allows you, at least they used to allow you to build right on the border. And I don't know if it's Providence, but I know there's other towns that you have to be set back, 12 inches or a foot. So your setbacks will vary from town to town.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else as far as compliance? Have you ever ran into a situation where the town said, take that off, that has to be taken down, or a violation, they have to take that down?
One socket. Absolutely. Yeah, we cut.
What's the situation like?
So there's certain things that are rules that in the fence industry, for example, driveways and houses built on a corner of an intersection. When vehicles are involved, especially if you're backing up a driveway, if your neighbor's got a 6 foot fence all the way to the curb and you're backing up your car and you can't see through that fence and somebody smacks you, that neighbor with that fence could potentially be liable in a lawsuit.
Okay.
Because the codes specifically in most cases say that once the fence passes the front threshold of your property heading towards the street, it needs to wing down to 4 foot high or less level for visibility reasons. If you're unfortunate enough to own a corner lot, you're never going to get a privacy fence approved to wrap the corner of your house, because at that intersection, that fence becomes a blinding area for traffic going back and forth. Doesn't mean that you don't see them. That's a who did it with or without a permit, I don't know.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's the key thing you have to keep in mind when dealing with fence height. So imagine the front of your property. Once you pass that threshold of the front of your property, it should go down to a 4 foot high. Well, in backyard, have all the privacy you want. But in the front, you have to consider what's on the side of you and what's in the front of you. And if you have a neighbor to your side of you in the driveway, you can go down 4 foot high so they can see.
Wow. Now I'm going through my database, like all these homes that I've seen, it all makes sense now. You know, why it's designed that way and why in corner lots are, you know, like
They're very scrutinized. They're very strict with corner lots.
Oh, okay. All right. That's good to know. That's really good information for realtors. What's the trend now with fences?
Well, because of metal prices and the instability of lumber prices over the last 4 years, vinyl seems to be championing the fence industry. Vinyl seems to be tethered to like petroleum prices. So when they flux, you'll see vinyl. I guess it's a petroleum product. Wood supplies are imported, so they're tethered to Canada and harvested trees. So I know we had a mill fire not too long ago in a couple of major mills, which shrunk the availability of wood materials right at the time when COVID happened. So wood product was virtually impossible to find. And then the steel industry affects your aluminum and your chain link. And again, some of that is imported as well. Vinyl has stepped up and become the go-to. It's a one and done system. So once you put it up, in theory, you never have to do it again, especially if it's a good quality system. And I'm seeing the vinyl manufacturers now create different wood patterns and things to break up the look of it, because the number one complaint that with vinyl, with those that don't like vinyl, is they don't like the white plastic look of it. In some applications, it looks beautiful, nice, clean, modern house with white accents, and the vinyl works. But if you go out to a beach town, it doesn't work so well. It screams, artificial. So they have wood grain pattern vinyl fences that mimic the look of wood, and done a few of them out in places like Coventry and up in the woods out there, and they're fantastic. They look great, and the best part is you don't have to do it again. It's done. You don't have to worry about it rotting, falling over. Your dog is safe. Your pool is safe.
What standard colors do they come in?
So right now, they used to be just white and then like a tan color, and then gray kept coming in and out of the industry. But now they're doing, literally looks like wood fencing. It's like, they pattern the knots and the grains and everything into the panel. You'll see it on the website. If you go to fenceri.com, there's some examples of it. We use a company called Active Yards, which recently got bought out. I'm not sure. I'm going to a meeting next week about the new company that acquired them. So they're about to get bigger. And if you go to Active Yards, I'm a dealer for them, and you'll see all the different color options, style options. It's quite amazing what you can do with the plastic.
And you do that like when you go to someone's house, kind of like floor sales. They bring in different types of flooring and they let people touch it. Do you do that too with the fence?
Yeah, we have the same tiles and pallets that we can do. One of my best sales card is finding a customer nearby and saying, go check out this address. And you'll see. But my vendor has some examples set up for display in-house. So if they want to get eyes on the product and see it right up close, I can send them there too. But most customers that I get, by the time they get to me, they've done their homework. And they already kind of know what they want to do. And my job is to just educate them on the pros and cons, because I don't want to give them competition out there that will give you anything. They will tell you anything. I don't like callbacks. So I want my customer to know 100%, this is what you're getting. This is what it can and cannot tolerate. And does this fit your need? And if you say yes, we go forward. But if it doesn't, just make sure we're clear. And I usually put in writing that this will not achieve this goal of yours.
Do you think, what kind of fence you think would bring up the value of the house?
I think anything permanent, because again, when people call me,
what's permanent? How do you make it permanent?
Well, if you get an aluminum fence, you get a chain link fence, you get a vinyl fence, you never have to change that the lifetime of the house. That's a one and done system. It's there forever. So the first thing you have to do is make 100% sure that you are okay with how this product looks, because you are going to be looking at it every day you live in this house. When you come home and you get out of your car, you're going to see this and you got to love it. Not like it, you got to love it. And so when customers call me up and they say, yeah, I'm looking for a cheap fence, the first thing I ask them is this your forever home? Is this where you plan on staying for the next 20 years? And if the answer is no to that, I'll give them, low grade options. They can get a wood fence or something that's got a short life expectancy. If it's an investment property and they don't care, okay, I'll give them that option. But if they tell me, yes, I'm going to be here as far as I can possibly, live, then I tell them, I said, this is not like buying a pair of shoes. Like when you do this, you are going to be looking at this thing every day. You're going to be potentially using it every day if it has a gate or something like that. So you have to love this. And this is not cheap. It's an investment to your property. It's like installing a new kitchen. You have to think about it. You have to really consider what it is that you want it to do. And then understand that once it goes down, it is now a permanent structure as an addition to your house.
Like if they said they were flipping the house, they wanted to increase the price. They wanted like the top notch, really fancy. You'd go with the...
Happens all the time. Our customers, they just want a quick wood fence because it looks nice and clean for the first year. It's up maybe 2 years. By the third season, it starts to weather. So they'll get a low grade cedar option and put it up. Although the low grade cedar options do tend to last pretty long too. The key is the fence post. If you put in a wooden post in New England, you can get as short as 3 years out of it, the way the moisture is in the ground. I warn customers about it all the time.
Wow.
And a few customers in Warwick that I've done installs and went over it. They just didn't want to spend the extra few dollars. And I explained it to them. I said, this is an addition to your home. If you're going to be here, and within 4 years, they called me up and said, 4 posts have rotted and snapped already. We should have done the metal. I said, it's not too late. So I had to go and take it all down. And whenever installing a fence, if it's short term, you can do your wood post, get away with it. It'll look nice enough for you to sell your home. If you're going to be there a significant amount of time, you want to go with a vinyl or a metal post that doesn't rot. And then you can put wood on it and you'll get 30 years out of it.
Okay. How would a homeowner maintain a wood fence?
So a cedar fence is the same material as the cedar shingling on your house. So most people will, for their house anyway, they'll do some kind of transparent stain, sometimes a solid stain, whatever they choose. You could opt to do that with your fence, but I find that nobody treats their fence. You just put it up and then it just stays there. And if it's a nice cedar, it will silver into a gray look. And again, depending on where you live. So if you live out in the woods, that nice, silver finish when it weathers in after a season or two, it goes nice with the aesthetic of your property. If you live in Providence, maybe not so much. And I see a lot of customers, if they have the ambition to do it, they will paint their fences. And it's like any other, wood.
So staining or painting, do you think will increase it or probably?
I will definitely increase the life expectancy of your fence.
Okay, good.
And so you already got if you went with a metal post system and a wood panel and you didn't touch it, you're going to get 20, 30 years out of it. If you put a wood post system in there, I don't care what you do with it. I mean, paint it, it's going to rot in the ground. It's going to snap. That post is coming down at some point. But as far as the wood material is considered, I always suggest if you're really going to do it, stick to the transparent stains. Because if you do paint it, especially the decks is the biggest question I get. How do I maintain this deck? Whenever it's a wood product, go with a transparent stain, because if you go with a solid stain or a paint, you are going to be scraping and painting that surface every 3 years. So if you go with nice transparent, kind of fades in or whatever, and then you can always restain it in a couple of years or whatever, but you don't want to be scraping paint in New England.
Yeah. Okay. And that's maintaining. What if someone has a wood post that's there already? How do they increase the life from 3 years to a little?
If you're
pressure treated, it's
PT is all we strongly suggest. We use 5-inch PT posts. We don't use anything from the box stores. They're just not designed for longevity. So we use 5-inch posts.
Wow.
And we get customers that absolutely request cedar posts, but you cripple life expectancy. You go on from, if with a PT post, you can go from 3 to 30 years. It's a roll of the dice in whatever religion you pray to. And if the gods are in your favor, you'll get 30 years out of it. If you go with cedar, you get 5 to 10 years, and I don't care where it's put. It just absorbs water and it rots.
Wow.
So cedar posts, I strongly suggest customers to avoid. The only customers that really pick wood are the customers that are adamant about an aesthetic, because they're the most beautiful fencing systems that money can buy are built out of wood. You can just make gorgeous things happen with wood.
Yeah.
They just don't have the life expectancy in New England. Texas, be there forever. But here, the weather's too harsh, too much moisture.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. If a homeowner wants to hire a fence installer, what should they look for in a company?
All contractors, I don't care what the industry is, including mine. Fence, decks, home building, whatever. License and insurance. And don't just take the license and be like, okay, I see you have one. Oh, you have insurance. No. Do your homework. Take the license. Rhode Island has a free website. You can go on the state website and you can verify that license is active. And then the second question is, can you have your insurance company send me your insurance certificate? And the insurance company that contractor is with will have their company send you the credentials. Just don't take their word for it. Take it for them. What I find is that the customer, because you hear horror stories from both sides, from the contractors and from the customers. And when you hear the horror stories from the customers, it's dollars to donuts, a customer that was looking at the bottom line price. They say, oh, this guy's charging $7,000 for this job, but this guy's going to do it for $2,000. And they don't check the license and insurance, and they hire the contractor, and it's subpar materials. It falls apart as soon as he leaves. Now that he's not returning your phone calls, you can't get in touch with him. So if you're going to do minimal homework, verify license, insurance, and of course the third piece of this is just get references. Have the contractor provide multiple references. The longer you've been in business, the bigger your list of references are, because we've got huge pull to pull from almost 20 years we've been doing this.
And not show me an example of something you did last week. Show me an example of something you did 2 years ago.
Here's what this thing looks like, 10 years from now. This is what you can expect your fence to go look like. Yeah.
And then what about factoring in pricing? What do you suggest for that?
So nowadays, we're back to almost like COVID standards, where it's, I literally, when I send out the quote, I did this morning on the quote, it'll say current market price. It's like selling fish. So it just, I used to be able to lock in for 30 days. I could send a quote. It wouldn't get stale for about 30 days because I'd be fairly confident the material wouldn't change. But now we're back down to about 5 to 10 days on price stability, because vendors have material. Once they sold out of it, now they got to order, and that stuff is still being imported. It's not being manufactured here just yet. Yeah. So you have to deal with a price increase.
If they're smart, they'll increase the price in the current.
I have heard rumors that what they're afraid is going to happen, that domestic people are going to start gouging. Happened to COVID. I remember, getting deck supplies and deck materials was a nightmare. And decking suppliers were really taking advantage of the shortages, even if they had plentiful supply.
So what about uneven terrain or a big giant tree in the way?
It's funny.
Besides taking down the tree.
It's interesting you say that, because I get customers that ask crazy things. Like, for example, let's say this is somebody's yard and the yard has a cliff. This really happened. I had a customer that wanted me to fence like 15 feet over I said, there's nothing there. Like, wow. How am I supposed to? And they just couldn't comprehend. I mean, I had to walk away from that. But when it comes to trees, I don't know how some people think, or maybe they just wake up in the morning, have a coffee, look outside, say, I think I'm going to get a fence, and don't think ahead that there's giant rocks that are sometimes in the way. Trees are number one obstacle that we talk with customers, and they're like, the tree always is on the border of the property, and it is on both neighbor and the customer's side, and they want us to go through it somehow. And I have to literally divert the question back to them. I say, explain to me how you would do it in this situation. In fact, take fencing away. I want you to put anything through this tree. Tell me how you would do it. So you have to be ready to compromise at some point. There are ways to get around them. You could box around it. You can move the fence line over, but some people
They don't want to lose that space.
Gosh, I've had customers argue. I had this one customer. He was battling over, literally, it was 3 inches. It was a matter of 3 inches on the line. And I said, why are we doing this? If we just move this 3 inches, And his answer was, well, once you give it up, you never get it back. What are you doing with it now? But whatever. We will work with them the best we can, but there are circumstances where you just can't.
Yeah.
You just can't. You got to move the obstacle, or you have to have some kind of compromise.
So if money wasn't an option, what would you do?
In some cases, I've been in that scenario. And in that scenario, we have built the fence into the tree.
Okay.
I've done that, again, with a disclaimer. I had one customer. He just recently sold the house. He became a very good customer. He had this beautiful ornate aluminum system. It was a huge, huge job. And in 2 spots, we built it into the fence with special adapters. And he would call me every 2 years to adjust the fence, because if you don't pay attention to it, that tree's constantly growing. If you don't pay attention to it, it will expand and it'll knock the whole line down. So I was going there, and we were measuring about 1 to 2 inches of growth every 2 years. I'd have to cut back and shrink everything and then put it all back together. But this particular customer knew it and stayed on it. Most customers won't. So I can build it, money's no object, but it's going to destroy a fence in 5 years when the tree grows.
Yeah.
So.
And then terrain, you mentioned the cliff. I mean, aside from putting in a 20-foot post to match up.
We've done that in a step. You have to run a long post, and we've done creative things to go through and over terrain. It all depends on, there has to be some reasonable expectation there too. There's usually 3 customers that I deal with when it comes to fencing. It's wants privacy. It's basically putting up the fence because of neighbors. The other person is installing the fence because they have a swimming pool. And then my third customer, most popular customer, is they have a dog. And it's the pet owners that we have the challenge with, because they want the fence to look good, but then they don't want gaps underneath it either. And you can have land that looks as flat as a table, but when you start installing, you'll find that there's a 3-foot difference from where you start on one end of the yard to the other end of the yard. So the fence has to change its angle, because if it doesn't, if the fence stays perfectly straight, by the time you get to the end of the yard, there's a 3-foot discrepancy underneath the fence.
Yeah.
So I've had customers, again, sign the paperwork, and where they was so adamant about that straight line that when we got to the end of the yard, there was almost a 2-foot deficit under the fence, and they didn't care. They put mulch in, they filled, they dealt with it. So all depends on the customer. When you get wild terrain like that, we do our best to keep a nice aesthetic flow. We want the top of the fence to look like saw teeth. Yeah. We try to make the lines slope and cut and be very nice and uniform. And we'll inform the customers before we install, because we have the experience to see where the deficits are going to be, and let them know, look, this is what it's going to look like. And you're going to have there's a crater here, because you see the ground goes up and comes. So we're going to go straight, and you're going to have a crater here, and you're going to have a hole here. So prepare. Call your landscaper or do whatever that after we install this, you're going to have to come up with some kind of fill. And we haven't had any problems over the years. So once again, it's all customer education. This is the extra steps that we take to make sure that our customer is 100% satisfied before we even break ground.
They're all animals, and some dogs are good, polite. They won't go dig and sneak under the fence. What's a solution for those animals that are like?
One of the first questions I ask customers with pets is, what's his temperament? Because I've had them go over 6-footers. Like they'll jump. German Shepherds will get a running start. I've witnessed it, and Huskies. I see running start and will jump on that middle rail, and they'll use it and go over. They can't come back the other way, but they don't care. And then they're born free. They run around. So huskies and shepherds. And usually the deterrent for those dogs is privacy. If they can't see what's on the other side, they usually don't.
They don't go.
Yeah. So if you got a dog, like some of the species that we've dealt with that are aggressive are, I believe we had, it's pit bulls. They're low to the ground. And I've seen beagles too, which the least aggressive dog, they diggers and they go under. What we do is for chain link, we add what's called a bottom rail. It's more of an expense because it's more material and labor, but your dog won't push through it. I have seen pit bulls and Rottweilers chew at the bottom of chain link fences and keep pushing and working it over time until they can make it enough where they could squeeze. Once they get their head through, then they just squirm their bodies and they go underneath the fence. There's paver stones you can line. A nice solution is lumber. Just go get nice 4x4s and create a mulch bed there. It's something that the dog can't punch through.
Yeah. Wow. So we talked about making sure you have a good contractor who's like licensed and insured. What about warranties? Is that something that's offered or?
So depending on the product. So again, speaking about wood on wood systems, there are no guarantees. It is as is system. We put it in, and if it changes by the time we finish the other end of the fence, it is what it is. You own it. We cannot predict what wood will do in the elements. Warping, checking, which is the wood splitting, will rot over time. Even gate sags, because the gate's on this big wooden post, and with the moisture and everything kind of expanding contraction, the gates will sag and adjust. However, Active Yards, the company that we deal with when it comes to vinyl and the aluminum, they offer what they call limited lifetime warranty. And what that means is basically that fence is guaranteed against fading, warping, rotting, all that kind of stuff. It's not, the limited part was not guaranteed for. It's not guaranteed with a tree falling on it or, your neighbor backing into it. But there are one and done systems is what I like to call them. They come with lifetime warranties on the material, and then me as a contractor, we give them a 1-year warranty on the installation, because if anything that we did is going to fail, you'll know within the first 2 months.
Do you give them any recommended maintenance? I mean, besides we talked about the wood, but metal or PVC, any recommended maintenance?
That's the beauty of those systems. You don't have to ever worry about it. You install it and it's done. You just forget it's there. And then hopefully it either blends into the background if that's the goal, or it just becomes another nice, exterior aesthetic of your home.
And sometimes with the metal fence, people grow vines and hope that
so
over.
That's, again, I would think that would be common sense. It's like having a shed or a house. If it's close to vegetation, how much of it do you want to take over your house and your shingles and grow into your windows? So same thing with a fence. If it's near trees and vegetation, you might want to train the vegetation so it doesn't put pressure on your fence system. While we're talking about this, I guess vinyl, the only thing that people have ever mentioned about vinyl, which I do see, is the growth of mold. So you'll get mold growth, but with the vinyl system, you get any citrus-based cleaner, and you get a pump sprayer, and you just shoot it with that cleaner, and then you can take a mop handle and a garden hose and wipe it. Done. It's like it was the day we installed it.
Okay.
Bounce right back.
Power wash? No.
Never use a power washer for decks or fencing. No power washing.
Okay.
I've seen, especially in the decks, I say, oh yeah, we put it on the light fan and all that, and it furs the decking boards, it shoves the moisture into it, gets behind the ledger, and it just causes havoc, especially if they do it at the end of the season, then it freezes, and it starts pushing the nails apart, and boards stop popping. It's just, don't do it.
So best thing for that is, I mean, you said the citrus.
Any citrus base, environmental friendly. I'll tell you, we use water. I take a bucket of water and a sponge and I just hit it and then I rinse it, done. Nothing wants to stick to it. Yeah. So any growth that happens on it, because we've had material sitting on site and pallet, and it'd be there for a few months before we could get to it. And then in the summertime, by the time you get to it at the end of August, there's critters living in there. there and everything. We got to evict, and we just take the stuff up and wash it with a sponge, put it up, and it's glaring like the day we bought it.
Awesome. What about metal?
Metal fence, like the black chain link systems have a vinyl coating, so it's essentially
really
vinyl
nice.
anyway.
Yeah.
And the aluminum systems, they fade somewhat over time. That I do see, but not to the point where it's going to be glaring. Unless you have a repair, then you'll see a nice shiny panel. But the aluminum systems are spaced picket systems. And the whole design of the aluminum system is to not become invisible, so your eye doesn't catch it. So when people pick the aluminum systems, they're beautiful, ornate systems that go around the yard, but they keep their view. I saw a lot of those by the water and in the woods. People that got tracts of land that they like to see. So as far as the fading is concerned, negligible.
What about wood fence? How do they clean it?
You don't. Wood fence, it just let it do. It's either going to stain it every so many years if you're inclined to do that.
And to stain it, you just rinse it with water or just...
Anytime you're dealing with wood, even if you're painting, sand. Use sander.
Okay.
Even decks. If you wanted paint or stain, you do a quick sanding. It's work. It's work. It's not easy unless you go vinyl and metal. Then it's easy.
Have we missed anything?
I don't think
we cover everything?
Yeah, well, that's it. We'll probably say, but you've asked some great questions about the fencing. Decks are another big part of what we do. Seems to do the majority of decks that we do are always swimming pool surrounds. So we're constantly building decks around people's new swimming pools, and it goes hand in hand because if you put in a swimming pool, you have to have a fence. It's code. Yeah. So we generally will build the deck and then fence off the yard. And that's what we do.
Nice. So Mario, how do people find you?
FenceRI.com. Just to remember, not RI fence, FenceRI.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you very much for stopping by.
It was my pleasure.
Good info.
My agent's got a squad, we all in the zone. In-house help, so they ain't doing it alone. They focus on clients, negotiating win, while the back end's hand 'em, man, that's how we spin. I hand 'em business, watch 'em all climb.